cut Matt LeBlanc's first feature, Pre-Friends. I actually cut his demo reel.
Nice.
He's like, "Oh, I'm going to go audition for this new sitcom," and he had to cut he
Oh
had to cut his
God.
commercials together because he had been in some Heinz commercials and stuff. So, and it turned out he was auditioning for Friends. So here's this kid in Michigan now at Steven Spielberg's company, sitting having like a lemonade in the courtyard with Steven Spielberg and his crew, celebrating that he got nominated for an Academy Award. I was just like soaking it up. Here's a tool that only functions because it has trained on the sum total of human creativity for free under what's called the Fair Use Act, to create a for-profit tool to re-enter the market from which that training data came. And that is the elephant in the room.
And there we go. And we're recording and we're live. All right, Mr. Greg Harrison, thank you so much for stopping by today.
It's great to be here, man. Thanks for
And
calling.
and it's a Friday, and I gotta give you props because you're in LA. You're outside. That's right. You're on the east side of LA, and it's the morning where you are right now. So I think this is probably
Yeah.
the first time I've had a guest where there's been that kind of a time difference where they're in the morning and I'm still in the afternoon. So look, thank you for taking the time to do this today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, so let's start first with where you are right now. You work for Motion, and I've got it right. You're the chief creative officer at Motion. And we got to say that Motion is spelled Mocean. So
Correct.
not the typical way you'd spell motion as in like moving. So tell us what your role there as the chief creative officer is and give us the Coles notes as to what Motion is.
Yeah. Well, Motion started, just to give you the history of the name, it started as 15 people in Venice that was walkable right off the beach. And the main focus was motion design, motion graphics and motion design combined with trailers, which at the time, 25 years ago when it started, was something that was not really happening in the movie trailer world. So editors would go and surf, bring in their surfboards and wetsuits and put them at the door and walk up to the office. So that was kind of the origin of Motion, very small office. Now we're about 200 people in kind of an office campus near Santa Monica. And we have a long history in entertainment marketing, which means making movie trailers for all the major studios and streamers. But we've really become a full service creative agency and production studio. So that means, we can do 360 campaigns. We do key art and posters. We do brand design. We do social campaigns. We do live action production, commercials. So it's really the full gamut of execution. And we even have a strategy and head of brand that looks at working with brands outside of entertainment. So we've really grown from our trailer and motion graphics roots into this full service agency.
Well, I'm really looking forward to our chat today. As always, we go back to the beginning. And even though you're heavily rooted in the entertainment industry, you didn't come from what we could say is a typical entertainment town. So, if I've got
No.
this right, was it suburban Detroit?
It
You grew up?
was, yes. I grew up in a place called Sterling Heights. I like to say, have you seen the movie 8 Mile
Yes. Oh, yeah.
with
There we,
Eminem?
there we go. No, I'm very familiar with that movie. Yeah.
Yes, I grew up on 15 Mile. So,
Okay. So, not too far from there.
yeah. So, 8 Mile was essentially the roads out from Detroit are numbered from 8 out to 23rd mile. And I grew up in suburban Detroit. It was kind of a suburban mall culture, very close to downtown, maybe a half-hour drive. But yeah, it was a pretty idyllic Midwestern upbringing, living in suburbia. And my dad worked for the big the automakers. The big three it was a company town, really, not unlike LA, but it was all about cars. So that was that's where I got my start. I grew up there and went to school in Michigan as well. I'm a Michigan State grad. So those are my humble beginnings.
Let's go back and reference your father for a second because he one of the passions that he imparted onto you was airplanes. He was very big into airplanes. So
What?
take us through that a little bit because a lot of people might be thinking, okay, your dad worked for one of the big three automakers. How do you also get into planes? Because I think a lot of people might be reconciling back to like commercial aviation and being a commercial pilot, but it sounds like he was more of a hobby pilot. Is that
Yeah, well, I think he was in the Navy. He was a
okay?
mechanic. on an aircraft carrier. And I think his love of aviation extended into being a private pilot. So he got his pilot's license when he was quite young. He and my mom at that time, when they were dating, they would fly a lot. In fact, he proposed in air to my mother in a
Okay.
yes.
So wait a minute, he's flying the Cessna. Does he even does he just put it into autopilot and go down on one knee there? 'Cause I mean, I don't
He
know
put it
much.
in the checklist. So they got in the plane and you have a checklist that goes down, you check the engine, you check the prop, you check the flaps, and at the end it was, "Will you marry me?" So,
Jeez. I
so it
mean,
was
that's memorable and adorable.
yes, it is. It's very cute. So, as a young child, even when I was an infant, they would take day trips and I would fall asleep to the hum of the engine. So I was in the back of a Cessna, sleeping. And then as I got older, you could take day trips in and around the Midwest. You can go to lunch for Ohio and fly back and it'd be like a day trip. Or you can go to these little islands that are off of Michigan. Uh, I have a lot of fond memories of flying with my dad and my family, and he gave me some pilot lessons. I could, in an emergency, take over, fly the plane. I don't know about landing, but I could definitely. He let us fly under his supervision, of course. But it was a lot of fun, especially when you're growing up and you're a kid.
I gotta tell you, there's like a thriller, a 90-minute thriller movie in that story right there, where like the pilot, like literally on a commercial airline, both pilots have a heart attack, and then the flight attendant has to call, "Is there a pilot here?" And when
And
no,
it's a kid.
"Is there a pilot on board?" And when nobody raises their hand, that's when you realize, like, God is calling you to rise up. And then the whole flight is like, kind of like, God, what was that, Joel Schumacher film? Phone Booth. Kinda like where it's just, yeah, where it's just kind of like you literally, it's kinda like when stage plays become films where it's like one set you're working with, and it's you and air traffic control going back and forth about how to land and so forth. But anyways, okay, so it wasn't just aviation though. Tell us about what happened when you got a hold of your first camcorder.
Yeah, well, my dad was very technically inclined. He was a mechanic. He put himself through college, actually working as a mechanic at the airport. He studied electrical engineering and was an electrical engineer for GM, General Motors. And so I think that's one of the things that he imparted to me was just a real technical knowledge. We tinkered a lot in the basement. We built a lot of things, whether it's model airplanes or we even built our home television set together from a kit. But
Sorry, there were television set kits? Like, I know there were computer kits, I'd never heard of
yes,
this one. Like a
yes, it's
tube
old
kit?
school. It's a very old school. I think they might still be around, but they're called Bell and Howell, and you could really get a kit for anything. But it came literally completely disassembled. You would put every diode and resistor in place. You'd learn to solder, put all the circuit boards together. It took us probably 2 or 3 months to build, but it became our family television. But that's really just to say that his kind of logical engineering mind was something that I really grew up with, and he got one of the very first camcorders on VHS, and that, really just captured my imagination. So, tons of shooting around the house, and I got together with my friends and would shoot short films or little music videos with it, and editing between two VHS tapes, hitting
Mhm.
play and record kind of thing. So I think that was the first kind of inkling of filmmaking, and, filmmaking is technical and creative together. It's kind of a left brain, right brain endeavor. So I definitely think that left brain and kind of introduction of technical, but also this kind of creative spirit that my dad had around engineering, that those two things found an intersection in film, I think.
Would you say that that was at the time when you found that you had a love for storytelling? Because you can film whatever you want, but in order for it to make sense and you want to share it with
Yeah.
people, there's gotta be some sort of narrative overlaid eventually.
Yeah. I didn't really think about it that way. I mean, we were early on, you just emulate, things you see on TV or I made some videos for class projects, and you come up with some kind of narrative. Sometimes it's a riff on an SNL skit or
Mm.
that kind of thing. I think my friend and I made a music video to "Let's Go Crazy" by Prince. That was
Let's get nuts. Let's slip on the purple banana till they put us in
yes,
the truck.
totally.
Let's go. Yes, that's my
Yes,
favorite Prince
totally. We
song.
did we did a pretty epic music video that took probably over a month to shoot around the neighborhood. But yeah, it was mostly play, to be honest. Like I don't think I really had any formal thought about narrative or study of film. It was really just play, and it was about getting together with friends and kind of riffing. But that kind of play, you learn the tech, you learn sort of how to mimic things you've seen. It's just sort of learn by doing in those early days, I think. Yeah.
I ask all of my guests who their influences are, and I think you're the first one to come back and say Jim Henson and the Muppets.
Yes.
And
I mean,
you
there's
know,
lots of influences for sure, but if I were to say, like, he's one of the first people that I understood as a creator behind television or behind something I loved, and I was quite young, but I watched The Muppet Show and I loved, the Muppet movies. And, I was, um, I liked watching movies, but he was the first person I think I must have seen interviews with him, and there were little behind the scenes things you could catch on television. I think it was the first time, and I think it was also watching the Muppets. It's real people on a set, but then the Muppets are there, and then you start thinking, okay, well, what's underneath? Like, what are the platforms? How are they getting their hands up? So it just started. The gears started turning about how things are made for television, and I think. I don't know. I just that was a touch point because I understood Jim Henson was behind the Muppets, and I was fascinated by that. I think that was my first kind of understanding that there was a director or a maker. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of the Muppets.
you are. Yeah.
Oh god, one of the things that
Who's your favorite character?
Rizzo the Rat.
Okay, nice.
Rizzo or God, is one of the newer characters. Oh, I forgot. He's a King Prawn. Oh,
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
yes. I think those 2 together are fantastic. It's funny because we were setting up our Christmas tree about a week ago, and I wanted my wife was like, "Well, let's put something on in the background while we do it." And she had never seen the Muppet Christmas Carol, and I
Oh, yeah,
wasn't sure how she was gonna receive it if I said, "Let's put the Muppets on." So I said, "Oh, my favorite Christmas movie happens to be a Michael Caine movie."
oh, yeah.
And she's like, "Oh,
Great.
okay, put it
Yeah.
on." And she's like, "What are we watching?" And then the Muppets start to show up, and I'm just like, "It is a Michael Caine movie. I'm not
Oh my
lying."
god, that's hilarious.
You know what I enjoyed about the Muppets is that they're very good at writing for both adults and kids
Yes,
simultaneously. And it's
yes,
not till you become older that you realize, "Hey, wait a minute. I realize why that line didn't land with me as a kid. It's because it's better as an adult."
yeah,
And
yeah. No, it's very true. It's very true. Because I've enjoyed those same movies with my kids. We went back and watched some of the old Muppet movies and seeing it through their eyes. But yeah, I enjoyed them just as much. And plus the layer of nostalgia.
who's
Um,
your favorite character? I gotta ask
I
you
would say
that.
Beaker. When I was growing up,
Ah,
it was
okay.
all about Beaker and my two sisters and I imitating Beaker.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember very distinctly, I think I saw some behind the scenes for the first Muppet movie, and I remember seeing it in the theater and just being blown away that you saw, like, on the show, you only saw Kermit, from waist up, right? And you're like, "Oh, that's a puppet." But, there's a scene where it's a full body, uh, Kermit riding a bike, and, of
Yes,
course,
I know
that's
which one
been
you're talking about,
100%
animatronics,
accurate,
yeah.
right? And I was just like, "How did they do that?" I remember being gripped by that, and then I later saw, at some point when I was younger, I saw the making of, and I was hooked. Yeah, so
Speaking of Jim Henson, have you ever seen the film Saturday Night? It was the, Jason Reitman film.
yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
I could not believe, 'cause, for anyone who hasn't seen the film who's listening or watching this, it's all about the very first episode of Saturday Night Live, where it came from, why the studio put it forward, how it almost didn't happen, and the stress that, Lorne Michaels was going through just to get that episode live, and Jim Henson's in it, and he's played by I don't forget the actor's name, but he plays Cousin Greg in Succession.
Yes, on Succession.
And it's
Yep.
funny because Jim Henson in at least in this movie, he's not getting any respect. Like, he's going back and complaining to Lauren that the, production
You're
crews
doing
are they're
you're doing
doing
lewd things with the
lewd
with the
things with the
puppets.
Muppets, yeah, and people are, like, kind of, like, laughing him off, and it's like, they do this with a number of actors where they're kind of, like, winking at their future, kind of like people are looking at these puppets and going, "This will never take off. That was a lie." Like, whoever plays Chevy Chase is very difficult, and they make comments that that will come back to haunt him as well, which it has, but okay, so I'm glad you saw that.
I did, and it was the one and only time the Muppets, and it wasn't even the Muppets. They were all one-off characters, done by the team of that did the Muppets. But yeah, it was never before or since have they appeared on late night.
yes,
It did not
that
go well.
No, it didn't go well at all. But another influence too is George Lucas. So, what was it about the Star Wars films that inspired you growing up?
I think it's the same thing because, yeah, I actually saw that, just to date myself, I saw that movie in the theater. And again, just as a pure cinematic experience, just being sucked into this world. I mean, there was nothing like Star Wars prior, the special effects, the worlds, the characters. It absolutely was one of those movies where my friends and I would go back and see it multiple times, in the theater. And I think it's always been a touchstone because, again, as you grow older and you learn more about how films are made, I dove really deep into sort of the making of and the behind the scenes of Star Wars. And again, it's that fascinating connection between technical wizardry, technology, logistics, and kind of puzzle solving combined with storytelling and creativity and building worlds and characters. And I feel like that kind of duality, I think that's why I was drawn to filmmaking and advertising and being in the media space. Is it really is those two halves, and it could never, it couldn't be more pronounced than in something like Star Wars, which was technically innovative, to the nth degree, and yet created this indelible story that has like lived on in a massive cinematic universe as well. So anyway, yeah, a huge early film going experience, getting my mind blown in the theater. Yeah.
Okay, so what was your favorite Star Wars film?
Well, I have to say it's gonna be one of the first three, and it really is Empire Strikes Back, I think. I do love watching A New Hope, but I think Empire Strikes Back is probably my favorite. I think just I love the Yoda sequences. There's the Henson connection, right?
Hmm.
So we got
Yeah.
Star Wars and Henson's intersection there, Frank Oz. But yeah, I'm gonna go with that. And all that, the Hoth sequence, the whole opening sequence is just stellar. I could watch that on a loop.
We also have someone else on this list. One of your teachers, Ms. Zappa. So,
Yes.
how did Ms. Zappa influence you?
Is that an incredible name or what? Miss Zappa. I mean, you're growing up and you have
It does sound like someone out of show business, that's for sure.
it really does.
It
She was a force. She was a teacher in my high school. She taught theater. She taught public speaking, and she started essentially a television production class. She got funding for the school to buy a bunch of equipment and create a small TV studio. And I was a freshman when she was doing that, and I was in one of her classes. And all of my interest in video production, working with my camcorder when I was younger, kind of all was kind of pretext for going into high school and seeing all of this gear that they had bought. And so I helped her set it up. She was planning how the class would go. There was forming of like student groups to make like a morning news program, all that. So I got heavily involved in TV production. But more than that, she just really saw the spark and the passion that I had, even when I couldn't articulate it to myself. She just saw what lit me up. And, I think she, after my dad, I think she was the person that really inspired me and reflected back to me what I might love, right? And help me articulate that and ultimately really support it, both in giving me free reign, within the class and even after school, I'd say, hey, I'm going to make something with this gear or whatever. She would let us, me and my friends, take the gear. So anyway, and then she was instrumental in me going to Michigan State because she also knew that they had at the time a cutting edge new facility for film and television. And so she actually drove up with me to Michigan State and we took the tour and she was like my agent talking to the dean. So
Nice.
uh, Miss Zappa, Linda Zappa, she was a very early influential mentor and kind of putting me on my path to my career.
Okay, so let's jump into that. Your move then to Michigan State University. Were you even looking at the university, or did she get that university? I guess in your peripheral.
Yeah, I never really thought this is kind of growing up in the Midwest, growing up in Michigan. I didn't. We did some traveling around the country, for vacations, but I didn't really think about the centers for film like New York and LA when I was considering college. It just didn't really wasn't on my radar. I don't think I was really, um, yeah, I just wasn't. I don't know if I wasn't mature enough, or I hadn't done the research. It was pre-internet. Also,
Mhm.
it just
Yeah.
seems like that, like a million miles away. So yeah, it didn't really cross my mind. I didn't really search. I really just toured colleges in Michigan, and I think I had a friend that was gonna that had gone before me. He was a grade ahead, and he really liked it. And I think what really sold me was uh, taking the tour, meeting some of the dean and the profs, and just really kind of loving that I could be 45 minutes or an hour from where I grew up. I could come back, see my family, but it was also a massive campus. It was a new adventure. It almost seemed intimidatingly large. So I feel like going to Michigan State was probably maxing me out already as a freshman. So yeah, I didn't really consider anything else.
Well, some of the universities in the US are like the size of small towns. Like, kinda like the same way you mentioned that the town you grew up in, most people worked for one of the big 3 automakers. And some of these small towns, and you can even say the same thing about Canada as well, everyone either works for the civil service or the university, or maybe some retail job around there too. So I can totally see how it was pretty daunting. But go into the program a little bit further because the degree you came out with was you were studying telecommunications, film,
Yes.
and TV. What did the typical course load look like? And I'm asking that from the perspective of a Canadian, where our university programs, even if they were to touch on something similar, would be way more theoretical than they are applied. And I know in the US, you guys do a much better job of weaving applied skills within the theory that you learn.
Yeah, what's interesting about Michigan State, it had both. The path that I was taking in telecommunications was very much about production. So those classes were intro to production, intro to remote camera. They had a back then they had a professional version of like a news ENG camera that had like a big 3/4 inch deck on your shoulder and you go out. But anyway, it was learning the cameras, learning the live switchers, doing live television, editing on videotape. It was very hands on. It was very much about the craft, the technical. And over in the English department was the other half, which was, film studies, where you'd watch and write about film or discuss film and kind of look at the history of film or film thematics. And, it was really interesting. There was kind of a community that was, loved film and making film. But they were kind of like subcultures. You could tell who was who was in the film thematics program and who was in the TV and film production classes.
I took a
Um,
couple of film classes and we had a running joke that film majors know everything about film except for how to enjoy a movie.
right, totally.
Yeah,
Yes.
because they would pick everything apart,
Yeah.
regardless of who made it, how celebrated the film was and so forth. But yeah, I know where you're coming from.
Yeah. But it was a great community of young people who loved making things, and that's really what lit me up. Being on the production side, I learned a ton about production, but even more than that, I think this is where I really look back and see this kind of entrepreneurial spirit that I've always had about just figuring stuff out or getting my hands on stuff. Because I took the classes, but the stuff that I learned the most from was coming up with, again, our my friends and I coming up with our own ideas, making our own productions on campus, finding crew, finding like-minded people to write with. And there was a student-run production company who's still there, called Telecasters. Such an old school name; it's amazing. Um, but they were funded by the university, and students could pitch ideas for shows, and they'd get a small budget, and you could make shows. So my friend and I, who I went to high school with, Scott Grayson, we went to the same high school. He went to Michigan State before me. We decided to okay, well, let's make a comedy show, and we pitched this idea. We had this concept of live in front of a studio audience, took place in a dorm room set, um, and we would do skits on the set, and then if anybody left the dorm room, it would cut to like all of these remote kind of pre-edited sequences around campus. So we got funding and we just really reinvented the wheel like from scratch. Here we are in Michigan, saying we're going to make a show. And we held casting, held auditions, we held interviews for crew, and we just amassed probably a good 100 students around the making of this comedy show, and it was called The Show. Um, and it completely, I was just completely obsessed with doing this, like round the clock, living at the production facility, writing, producing, directing, editing, anything I could do. Um, and it was really the beginning of some of the lifelong friendships I still have today. But and improbably, that show is still going, if you can believe it. It's on its 37th season or something. It's
So
like one of the longest running college television shows out there. But it just speaks to this idea of just getting my hands dirty and just there's nothing better, and that's one of the pieces of advice I give to young people is there's nothing better than to keep making that loop of like have an idea, try to make it, finish it, learn from it, do it again. Like that was really so much of my college experience. And I, in fact, got a lot of the credits for my degree through independent study, which, these projects that I would hatch and I would get approved for credit. So
so the show actually you managed to it wasn't just an extracurricular activity, you actually managed to get credit for it as well.
I believe I got a few credits for it. Just given the sheer amount of hours I spent on it, I think I was able to pitch that somehow. I remember independent study. If you pitched a project, and I pitched that, and I also pitched a short film that I wrote and made as well. But anyway, that probably is a defining aspect of being at Michigan State. And like I say, I would say probably a good 20, 25 people from that graduating class and the people that were on the show, we all moved out to LA together, and we still know each other. I would say a good percentage of them are still here. I still see them. It was really kind of the, I don't know, it was this kind of beginning place where we all found these the love of film, the love of making stuff, and they're all in the film industry in some way or shape or form as well.
Where did the show air? Was there, like, closed circuit television on campus, or was
Yeah,
it
it
on,
was on
like, public
campus.
on
Yep,
campus? Okay.
it was on
Alright.
campus, and then it would play on cable around campus. It played off campus through the local public access, and then there was a national college network that started up that was taking submissions from all kinds of college productions. So we got on that. So we had some national airing on other college campuses as well. So it ended up having some reach. Its quality was hit or miss, as most college productions are. But I look back on it, and there was some legitimately funny stuff that still holds up. Yeah.
The funny thing about the show, though, now would be if it is still running like you said it is, it's probably on YouTube, and it's probably a
Oh
TikTok
yeah.
channel.
Oh yeah. 100%. They're on YouTube, but they still have riffed on the same logo that we made then. They
Well, that's
still,
good.
yeah, they
Okay.
still
Respect for
retain
history.
the created by credit, which is wild. There's a lot of running gags from the early seasons that they still riff on. It's wild. It's wild to see.
Could you imagine going back in time and telling your younger self that this show is gonna continue to live on, but by the way, it's going to be filmed on phones, and it'll be on a platform called TikTok, and people will more than likely consume this on their phones? Like, you'd
Yes.
just be looking at the landline across the room and going, "What?
Yeah.
How?" I know, it's crazy how things have
Yeah.
changed.
It is wild. It is
Okay,
wild.
so you brought out moving out to LA, and you made that move a little bit early. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. You hadn't graduated yet, but you managed to secure a 3-month internship in LA with it was Craig Murray Productions.
Yes. Yes. And that brings us to another huge mentor and influence on my life, Craig Murray, Michigan State grad, and we had met um, just kind of by happenstance at the college because he had graduated years before, and he was touring the new facilities with the dean. And like I said before, I virtually lived there. Like I would just, you know, I was there all the time, and I was actually dubbing some of my work and onto a tape, and it was playing out at a monitor. And he happened to catch a local commercial that I had made. It was for the Department of Health to get kids to wear helmets. So I like made a local commercial, um, and I ended up winning a local Addy, which is an advertising award for it. And so anyway, it caught his eye, and he um, he asked who made it, and I was in the editing room. We got introduced, and I found out, he was a Michigan State grad, and he was out in LA, and he was starting a trailer company called Craig Murray Productions. And he said, I might need an intern. So I still have his business card from that time. But yeah, I went out in my junior year and spent 3 months in LA. Um, and it was Craig starting his very first company. And just by way of context, Craig Murray Productions had many iterations over the years. He's been in the business 40 years. We just celebrated him at the Clios. He got a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Clios.
Nice. Yeah, I'm familiar with the Cleos, yeah.
Yeah, and but his company evolved into what is today Motion, and he's still our chairman of
Nice.
chairman of Motion. Uh, but anyway, that internship was again incredibly formative. One, I got a reason to go out to LA and really see LA and the mecca of film, and at that point I was ready because I'd watched a ton of films. I'd been a filmmaker at Michigan State. I was very, cognizant of like just wanting to drink it up in LA and go to the theaters and see, films in LA was just a totally different experience. Got to go to the various studios. And then of course work at Craig's, I was assisting all the editors who were cutting trailers. We got cuts of the film. We got to see dailies of the films. I was dubbing tapes or loading tapes, but I was also just picking the brains of the editors. And at night, I would edit and try to cut my own trailers and show them and get feedback from the editors. And then Craig was a huge mentor, kind of showing me how to write copy and how to structure a short form story in 2.5 minutes for trailers. But it was so fun, and I think, really in college, I knew this is what I wanted to do. But when I came out and I was involved in that, I was like, slam dunk. I got to find my way to LA and get into film.
Okay, so that was gonna be kind of my next question. So prior to getting this internship in LA, was the goal always to go out west?
I think by the time I was in college, I thought about it, and I thought about movies and I loved what I was doing in school. But I think it was my experience 3 months in LA that really firmed it up, and that I had some skill for it. I think one thing that really blew me away and that kind of gave me a lot of confidence was here I was traveling 2,200 miles from home, and I'm in LA and I'm intimidated. It's a massive city trying to navigate driving eight lane highways and all that stuff. But I got to Craig Murray's office, and they had the exact same editing system that I had in college.
Oh,
And it
that
kind of
must have brought a bit of
demystified.
a
You
lot of
think about
comfort.
LA as sort of this untouchable thing. You're in Michigan and all this, but here I was, like this editing machine that I basically like slept under in school was the editing machine that they were cutting trailers on. And I was like, okay, this kind of, I don't know, just it demystified it somehow. So I could get right in there and start cutting. And that was I don't know, real revelation. It gave me some confidence that I could do that.
So this internship did a lot for your career. And we see a lot of people throughout their academic careers, they get a taste of professional life before they get a chance to graduate, and then they drop out and they go all in on it. Was Were you ever considering that? Like, did you look at your stint in LA and go,
Yes.
like, especially when you just mentioned that the equipment they were using was exactly the equipment you were using in school, was there had to have been a point where you're like, well, why would I pay for a fourth year? Like, why would I pay for a senior year if I can already use this tech and I can already start building upon what I've learned?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of jokes while I was on my internship about, oh, you should just stay.
Mm.
And it kind of seemed interesting to me. But there was a woman who was the office manager, and she had very motherly advice for me, and basically said, it might seem fun right now to not finish, but just go back. You've got one more year. Just get your degree, and jobs will be here. Um, and I think that was the right thing to do. I absolutely am glad that I went back and graduated. And um, but what was nice is I learned a tremendous amount um, while at Craig's, and then I stayed in touch with Craig. Of course, I would send him my more student work, and we stayed in touch. And then he gave me a job offer right out of college, so I was able to go back to LA with a job, with a salary, with health insurance. My parents
Mm.
were like, "Our work is done."
That's it.
It really was a gift. It was a gift, and I know I worked hard for it. But it was really all of that, just passion and like living and breathing the making, as I was saying earlier at college, that translated into being effective and at on my internship, and then Craig giving me this break. I mean, it's a massive break to get a salaried job offer as an editor of trailers right out of college. It
So
really
he gave it to you right after college? It's not like 3 or 4 months out, like at the
no. He
tail end of
basically said, "Oh, when are you graduating? Okay, well then, whenever you're done graduating, come out. There's a
God,
job
I
for you."
that would have either made me talk myself out of my final year of university, or I'd
Hmm.
be trying to find ways to graduate early
Right. Yeah.
because I'd be so anxious, I'd wanna hold on to that opportunity. So Craig hires you back,
Yes.
and then from there, you how does your workload or your responsibility shift from, say, intern Greg to full-time employee Greg?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't. There were more senior editors than me, but I was able to cut. Uh, I was contributing to cuts on trailers. I was cutting a lot of TV spots. So, there's the trailer, which is usually a 2 minute and 30-second piece, which is a bit more complex. And then there's lots of TV spots, which are 30 seconds. So I cut my teeth on a lot of TV, but I worked my way up to cut on trailers as well. I did some graphic design as well. This was the very early days of graphic design on early kind of computer graphics. Um, and again, just there's still a ton of mentorship, even though I was on staff as an editor. There was another younger editor, Mark Woolen, who has gone on to I'm sorry, movie trailer fame, with his own company, Mark Woolen and Associates. If you're not familiar, I would look him up, but he's done every amazing indie cool trailer there is, including the Social Network trailer. If you remember that with the
Oh, I
chorus,
remember that,
the
yes.
Radiohead song, that was him. But he was an editor when I was an editor at Craig Murray. So I learned a lot from him. I got to pick the brains of all the people. So I was just in the trenches. I had deadlines. I learned that part of having a real job. I wasn't just a student. Um, but I was also restless. I feel like being in your early 20s and you've graduated and you're out in LA. I had the staff job, but again, my parents were very, very happy. But it was not. It was probably 6 or 8 months later that I went freelance, which was
Oh,
not a
yeah.
word that my dad was at GM for 35 years. It's like in a company town. Wait a minute, what's freelance? That's like a euphemism for unemployed, I think. But
I mean,
that's what I did.
was your dad a union guy by any chance at General Motors?
You know what? No,
Okay, he
the
was
electrical
management then.
engineers were not
Okay.
unionized. Yeah.
No, because my dad was a union man. He wasn't in the automotive sector, even though his union was the Canadian Auto Workers, and I was wondering if pension came up with your parents.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yep,
absolutely, and it
yep.
was the golden age of pension, and he really rode that wave of, like, the automakers where just you know, it was the heyday of, Detroit, really, the Motor City, and, I think right as he was getting near retirement age is when stuff started to falter, but he got early retirement out of GM, and then he worked for, a mirror, manufacturer that served the automakers, and then he retired twice, essentially. But yes, pension was a big part of that. But yeah, so, for them, my dad was the first person to ever finish college. He was committed to this job, and here I am out in LA with this job, and I quit, essentially. And I remember being on the phone and my parents kind of saying, "What are you doing out there?" Like, there was real concern
Yes.
on their in their voice. But I have to say, like, if we look at that pattern of, like, the entrepreneurial restlessness, it really was throughout my junior high school, and then college years of just doing my own thing. And I'm really glad I did it because I went freelance because I wanted to see what else was out there. Um, and I did have this skill as an editor, and so I was able to get work as an assistant editor on feature films. I got to see how feature film editors work, and the real key here, again, it kind of dates me, but today everybody knows you cut movies on laptops, right? Back then, it was the very beginning of digital nonlinear editing, like the Avid. Premiere was not even a glimmer in anyone's eye. It was actually Avid 1.0. And because of my technical background and because of my knowledge of editing, I leapfrogged all the union rules to, like, be an assistant editor on these big features because they were using this nonlinear technology. So
Oh, there was no one in their membership that could satisfy the
yeah,
requirements.
no. So I
Oh,
would go directly to these companies and get trained, and then the studios were calling the companies and saying, "Who's trained in this technology?" And so typically in the Editors Guild, there's, apprentice editor, and you build up from apprentice to assistant to an editor, and it's a whole journey. But it was throwing the industry in chaos, this technical disruption. And they were hiring assistant editors that were just focused on the tech side. And that was my ticket, you know? So I was assistant editor for a time at Amblin Entertainment, Steven Spielberg's company, when they were doing the live action Flintstones with John Goodman and Rick Moranis,
oh
and they were
God.
cutting in.
That was great.
Yeah,
Oh, Rosie O'Donnell as well. Yeah, I think she was
yeah,
Betty.
she's in
Yeah,
that
because
too.
she, cause she
Totally.
could, because she could nail the laugh.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, exactly. Totally.
Yeah.
They were cutting nonlinear. I was digitizing the footage. I was managing the files and the bins and teaching the editor some of the tech. But the director would come in. I'd watch them do notes. We'd go to screenings. We'd see the feedback notes. It was fly in the wall stuff. And then I was there for their courtyard celebration of when he got nominated for the Academy Award, the dual Academy Awards. He had Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in '93. So it was just, I was like, oh my God, I know I'm just like this nobody as an assistant editor, but I'm on the inside. So here's this kid in Michigan now at Steven Spielberg's company, sitting having like a lemonade in the courtyard with Steven Spielberg and his crew, celebrating that he got nominated for an Academy Award. I was just like soaking it up, learning so much, just watching it unfold. So I did that. I worked on a bunch of features that were using this tech. Some on location. I was down in Florida for a movie called The Perez Family with Marissa Tomei, and they were actually screening dailies in 35 and then cutting on digital. I was the assistant editor digital for what's this? What was it called? 6 Degrees of Separation. It was a play that got adapted into a movie, and it was oh man, why am I blanking on his name? Will Smith's first dramatic role. And so
Okay.
that was great because it was the playwright, the screenwriter, the editor, and the director all sitting in a room, and I was watching how films get made by some of the best people. So that education of just flying the wall, that's why I went freelance. So I didn't get paid a lot, and I did not have health insurance, but
Mm.
it was an education, and it was exactly what I wanted. Yeah,
What did Craig Murray say to this? Because he brings you on board.
I know.
He
I
gives you
think
all
if he
these
was on here, he'd be pissed. He would tell you
I
he
was
was pissed.
I did I was gonna say because he is like you said, his company evolved into Motion and he still plays a role in it. But yeah, after 8 months. It's not like it was after like 3 or 4 years or so forth, but yeah, only after 8 months. And you got a lot of other credits too we could talk about. Like, okay, so Canadians are gonna definitely love this one. You did some of the marketing work for the Mighty Ducks.
Yes.
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 That's hilarious.
Oh
Yes,
yeah, no,
we're
you Honey, I Blew Up the Kids as well. So we're
yes.
already working with Disney.
Yeah.
And I there was also a point too where it was called Groove. It was a film that, you
Yes.
really got your hands dirty on. Like, how like, you were also selling this at Sundance, weren't you? Like, so what role did you play with
Yeah.
that?
Well, that really is the next chapter, of, going freelance, and I will say that Craig, to his credit and just bless his heart, the door was always open, uh, to go freelance, and that's really what funded the next chapter of my career, was my ability to edit for Craig, save up money, and then live simply and try to figure out how to be a filmmaker. So everything I'm describing in this period was around 92, 93, late 93 into 90, like early 94. And so I was working on documentaries. I also cut an independent feature myself. I cut a feature length documentary about Amy Grant for Warner Brothers Records. And I cut Matt LeBlanc's first feature, Pre Friends. I actually cut his
Oh,
demo reel.
nice.
He's like, "Oh, I'm going to go audition for this new sitcom," and he
Oh,
had to cut his
god.
commercials together because he had been in some Heinz commercials and stuff. So, and it turned out he was auditioning for Friends. It was wild.
Which is
So,
funny because he basically plays a kind of sort of an out of work actor that needs that kind of help with a demo reel to get noticed. So it was like life
yes,
imitating
totally.
art at that point.
It was wild. Yeah, but he starred in this indie film that was absolutely terrible. but I got great experience. And so I got in the editor's chair of long form, which was great. And I saved up that money, worked for Craig occasionally. And then I moved to San Francisco, kind of sight unseen. I went up there because on a weekend, I think we had some friends up there and we went up there and I was just blown away. I was like, whoa, this is what a city could be, right? Because
Mm.
LA was this sprawling megalopolis and it was really just, when you're there with no money and living in the valley, it was a little oppressive. And you go to the Bay Area and it's just so lush and beautiful and just the historic kind of architecture and I don't know, the energy of San Francisco really just struck me. And again, this kind of impulsive aspect of just saying, yeah, I think it'd be fun. I'm just going to move to San Francisco. So that's what I did. A lot of my friends were still in LA. I just moved up. Um, but around that time, I was getting into electronic music and listening to a lot of electronic music, seeing DJs in LA with some friends. And I was on an early email list called SF Raves that I would dial up on my little MacBook 140. And I realized that San Francisco was like a mecca for raves and electronic music.
That I did
And
not know. Okay.
yeah, huge, huge epicenter of West Coast uh, rave culture. So I would track all the parties and the DJs, and people would, I'd learn like a lot about like various artists or DJs that I wanted to check out. But I also saw the throwing of all these really cool underground parties on the email list, and that's really what also drew me to San Francisco. There was a posting on this email list, and it was a place called the Blue Cube, and there had been this epic rave party thrown at the Blue Cube, and then there was a posting. There was a room for rent at the Blue Cube, and I just said, well, I'm going to go live at the Blue Cube. That's what I said. So it was pre-internet, really. I mean, just early internet. It's not like you could go on, line and look at the place. So I had the guy who was renting it, like literally FedEx me some photos of the place to make sure it
Nice.
was livable. But that's what I did. I moved up there. I lived very simply and I got myself to San Francisco. And that, as you said, really was the beginning of what turned out to be my first film, which was called Groove, which is about one night in the underground rave scene in San Francisco.
And starring Hamish Linklater.
Yes, yes, and a young Nick Offerman plays the cop who busts
Oh,
the.
geez. Okay. Nick Offerman's in it as well, too.
Yes, Nick Offerman's in it. He's the cop that busts the rave, and it in all of his just sardonic wit and droll delivery. He's amazing in it.
Mm. Well, Hamish
But
Linklater.
lots to tell you about that. But yes, that's how I got to San Francisco, and that was the beginning of trying to figure out how to be a filmmaker.
And part of that involves you forming a company called, we've got here, Map Point Pictures.
Yes.
And what I gather from this story, it's something that a lot of other people who have been entrepreneurial have they've gone this route as well. Is that they're freelancers like yourself. The contracts keep coming in, and they have to make a decision: do they plateau, or do they formalize this and start hiring people to help and take on those bigger challenges and those bigger contracts?
Yeah. Well, this was really uh, out of necessity, more than
Okay.
anything. Again, I think if you go back through the story, and it was helpful to kind of, I prepared to, do this podcast, it was interesting to kind of think about some of these chapters and this through line of entrepreneurship and just sort of coming up with stuff and figuring it out. Really forming a company was exactly that. I really had no business acumen, formal business acumen. I just was like, I love I love going to these raves. I felt like there was a movie in these raves. I was taking notes and trying to write a script. And I was like, well, how am I going to make this movie? I need money. Well, how am I going to get money? Well, I have to raise the money. To raise money, you need a company. How do you start a company? Like it literally was that. It was just that chain of thought.
Okay.
So, yeah, I formed a limited liability company by going to the Film Foundation. There was Film Arts Foundation in San Francisco. It was a great film community there. And there was a lawyer speaking about forming companies to make films. So it turned out he would form a company for you for 5,000. So I went back to Craig Murray and edited for some time, made $5,000
Okay.
and started a company. And then I had to learn how to write a business plan and I'd find a producing partner. It really was just one of those things like, I want to make this movie. How? Well, okay, well, I need these things. How do I do those things? So, like, my producing partner, Danielle Renfrew Barons, who we're still dear friends, and she's a fantastic producer and exec producer in the film world these days. But I found her through a mutual friend and interviewed her, and she had done some documentary films as a producer. And she came on to help me raise money and to produce the film. But it really was very similar to college and the show. It's that idea of you're just getting like-minded people together, and are you down to do something kind of out there, and just keep going every day. So we raised money independently through friends and family. We got a little bit of money, um, but we process took years really to see if we could raise enough money for the film, and we eventually got just enough to shoot it. And it was one of those things. We're going to make $1 million movie. How much do we have? 20,000. Okay, that's
Mm,
right. So we kept pushing and pulling, like, how little could we do it with, and then eventually we just said, whatever we have in the bank, we're gonna shoot this movie on this date, and it was like the beginning of September or something. That was our deadline. Um, anyway, there's so much to talk about. I feel like I could go on and on, but that was an insane adventure. That was like coming up with how to do the show, but 1,000 times more difficult.
God. But before Danielle joined you as your producing partner, did you have a business mentor? Like someone you could bounce these questions off of? Was it, say, for example, that lawyer that you paid to incorporate or build or incorporate that limited liability company?
Absolutely, yeah. We stayed in touch with him, and he ended up doing our company's taxes.
Okay.
Um, And, Craig was an entrepreneur too, which was really cool, and I could tell him what I was up to, and he gave me advice, and he actually invested some in the movie himself, and he invested, um, not only shares or our money into the movie, but he invested in kind the post-production. So I actually edited the movie at his company as part of
Okay.
his investment. Which was huge, so I got the editing infrastructure from him, so I could once we shot in San Francisco, I came down to LA and edited the film at his company. So he continued to be a mentor and a benefactor, supporting my filmmaking, giving me editing jobs when I needed to eat. So
Hmm.
he
Yeah.
he was he was there through this part as well, for sure.
Okay. So let's bring things full circle. Motion. Where did the opportunity to join the company come from?
Yeah. So I made Groove, and we took it to Sundance. We submitted blindly to Sundance. We got in, and we sold the movie at Sundance. And we sold it to Sony Pictures Classics. Came out in theaters in 2000, and we really rode this wave of rave culture and electronic music kind of hitting the mainstream. So it was a real opportunity to be in the film biz. Um, and we developed films. I got paid to write films. We worked hard to get another film. We had many films that we were going to make. We moved back to LA because Danielle was from LA. She had been up in San Francisco too. Moved down to LA, and tried to get lots of things set up at studios. And it was very, very difficult, even with the success of Groove. So we ended up developing a lot of things. We produced some things. She produced some things for other filmmakers, and then we made another film for IFC called November, which was with Courtney Cox and Nick Offerman. Actually, he's in that as well. But around that time, I just realized that it was very, very difficult to make a living in independent film. Even though I was getting paid as a writer, I got paid to develop some of the films. We just couldn't get them off the ground. I met my wife in the film biz too. She was a journalist, and I actually met her at Sundance because she interviewed me when I sold Groove. We always joke that it's good that she liked the film, but we ended up getting together, uh, and she moved with me down to LA, and she was an aspiring novelist. So here's an independent filmmaker and aspiring novelist wanting to have a family, and we're like, how are we going to feed our children? so, um, so really, that was the transition. Taking my love of filmmaking, everything that happened in the independent film world, and Craig. God love him, he played the long game. He's like, "Are you ready to come back?" So that was the transition, and that was really that was the next time I was on staff anywhere since I was on staff for 6 months with him. But I came back to run his Burbank office, and at that time it was Motion, um, and he needed a new creative director to run the Burbank office, and it just made a lot of sense to go back and have a creative job that I needed the health insurance now.
Mm.
I needed the regular income. My wife was writing her first novel at the time, and our first child, Auden, was on the way. So it made total sense. And that was really the beginning of the chapter that I'm still in. Is really growing at Motion and bringing what I loved about filmmaking into the advertising and entertainment marketing space.
How hands-on are you as the creative director at that level? Because it seems like you're starting to manage people more rather than involve yourself in the creative process. And is that hard for you to do? Because everyone gets into the creative business because they want to make the magic. It's not because it's like I'm looking forward to HR meetings and spreadsheets.
Yeah, well, I mean, the business of making trailers is not too corporate, I can tell you.
Okay, well that's
Um,
good.
yes, it is. Well, creative directing is creative, and I think the transition from making, like you could think of, like, okay, if I'm editing, I'm making, right? Like the editor who's editing the trailer, you feel like you're making. And that was me. I was in the chair, I was cutting trailers, and throughout all this time before I became a creative director, I was still editing for Craig on and off to live. So the transition from editing to creative directing is a natural progression because so much of creative direction is being able to impart your wisdom and knowledge of story structure and tone and inspiration or ideas of what has worked in the past to a larger team. In my later role as an executive creative director and now chief creative officer, a lot of times I'm mentoring people that are coming up through a craft. So they're a writer or they're an editor, and they are ready to move into a creative directing role, but I think they tend to cling to like the pencil or the editing system, like they're leaving behind, like you said, their craft. But I always describe it as like an orchestra. You might study for a long time to play the violin, and then someone says you're going to conduct and you trade your violin for like this stick, and you're like, what does a conductor even do, right? But I think the real um, trick is to understand that creative direction is kind of the next layer or level of creative direction, and it really has a lot to do with filmmaking and directing. I would say a lot of my leadership skills were formed being a director throughout my career. And so I think of myself, as a leader of a company. I really lean on directing. And a lot of that has to do with setting a vision, creating enthusiasm across a large team with a lot of diverse skill sets, a lot of diverse personalities. You want to create this excitement so people can contribute, but you also have to kind of keep clear the vision of where you're headed. So it's this kind of balance between the real and the ideal and this inclusion and this collaborative spirit. Like it takes a real skill to develop that and let your team thrive. And then you can be far more effective in guiding the direction of not just one piece of creative, but the creative output of a team, really. And that was a lot of what I learned moving from creative director to ECD and now chief creative officer is how to amplify my knowledge and wisdom and impart it to a larger and larger swath of the company, I think.
Can we go into some of the details about what it takes to make a great movie trailer?
Yeah.
Because you how much of the story do you have access to? Because a lot of these trailers come out while the film is still being made, or it's in post production. Maybe principal photography is wrapped, but like I have to imagine they don't just give you clips. Like, do you get a chance to read the entire script as well? So there's some greater inspiration, so you can kind of direct the very few scenes you have access to. Like what do they give you? Like, what does that playground look like?
You often get just about everything. Um,
Okay,
so yes, you will read the script. It's highly secure. I mean, we're obviously dealing with things that are not released yet. So sometimes you have to drive to the studio and sit in like a safe room to read the script. It's like
no, that makes
very,
sense.
very
Yeah.
kind of. It's very like CIA level security stuff. But yes, you get to read the script. You can understand story. You can understand tone of voice that way. You might if you're cutting early on a larger film, you might have access to dailies, and be, sometimes those early teasers, those early announced teasers are cut, you know, from dailies. Um, and then, of course, you get every version of the movie as every cut of the movie. So you see the first assembly, and then you might see after they got screening notes and they changed it again, or maybe they reshot, and then you're getting the reshoot. So, on a large film, this process I'm describing could be upwards of a year and a half. Um,
Wow, for just 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
yeah. Yeah, and it can be hundreds and hundreds of versions. Any one version might be a particular take on the movie, like what is our way in? What's the song? What's the tone? What's the story angle? And then you might iterate that version, 10, 20 times. And then you might have, um, I don't know, you could have anywhere from 5, 10, 20 directions that you also iterate. And then you are in competition with maybe 2 or 3 other trailer houses that are also doing that. And I'm describing kind of the
Okay.
largest, most, um, the highest tentpole movies that so much is riding on it opening globally, but this is the amount of effort and time that really goes into making, the marketing campaigns for these big tentpoles. It's a lot.
And how does social media play a role in this? Because the trailer will drop, everyone will pretend they're Roger Ebert. And then does any of that feedback dictate how trailer number 2 is, cut?
Uh,
Give you or even like the
yes.
movie itself. Yeah. Give you an
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
The
It's funny as the rise of the internet. Absolutely, that feedback loop I think is a critical feedback loop that so many filmmakers and even studios now have their ear to. Um, there's absolutely that dynamic. Early teasers that might. I feel like that happened, if I remember right. Um, the live action for the first live action Sonic teaser. I think
with yeah, the hedgehog, no
fan
one liked the way he looked. Yeah.
fans hated the way he looked, and it did change how they approached the VFX.
Yeah, they redid it. Was supposed to be somewhat grounded in reality, if you can say that for a blue talking hedgehog,
Yes,
and then
that's
they
right.
had to go back and make him cartoony, like he was plucked right from the game.
Yeah,
Uh,
it was like in that uncanny valley. He was too
yeah.
real, and it was gross. Yeah, it was.
Well, it happened with the, Superman trailer as well too, and it actually dictated what happened in the movie, but I think they retroactively changed it in the trailer. There's a scene where the crowd is jeering him, and someone throws a piece of bread at him or like a bun or a bagel at his head, and David Cornswood flinches as he gets hit in the head with it, and then the feedback loop on that is that he can stop bullets without even realizing he's being shot at, and you're gonna tell me that bread's gonna aggravate him? So they had to digitally remove the blink
Right,
because of that.
right,
Yeah,
right.
and it's funny too because we were talking about this off camera, is that every once in a while, the trailers will feature footage that doesn't make its way into the film, and the one that I was citing with you was, Felicity Jones's character in Rogue One, Star Wars Rogue One, Jyn O'Sur. She's playing a rebel, and she has this line where she says, "It's a rebellion, so I rebel." And I remember a lot of people were like, "Oh, let's see where this goes," and it didn't even make it into the film. And that became a story after.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it depending on the size of film and the amount of time and the choice of the studio, there are times where that line might have been in a cut of the film, but in the final film it was removed. But as you could see just in you stating that sentence, it's such has such economy of story,
Mm,
right? And character definition. And so much of the art of trailers is to take the spirit and theme and tone and story of a 2.5 hour movie and make it 2.5 minutes, right? And just think about that amount of compression that has to happen. So if you're a student of trailers, you realize, they're really fun to watch, right?
they are. I love them.
It's one of the few pieces of advertising that people seek out and will wait for a trailer drop because they're little pieces of entertainment themselves. But if you watch, there's so much economy of craft. You could really learn a lot about story by studying trailers because you realize in that economy, okay, you need how many shots can you get it down to? How many lines can you get it down to? Uh, what juxtapositions can you put that give you um, the plot progression? This is really the art of both the creative director and the editor and the writer collaborating on these ways to compress story. Um, so that is a lot of what the churn is not only, and not only once you get the story, is it the right part of the story that you want to tease? Is it the right tone? How does it work against the music? Music, we can go through hundreds. I dare say probably the most nightmarish for our music supervisor probably pushed 800 songs on a trailer, probably exploring
Really?
over a year. Yes, it's crazy. So you can see the granular nature of like all these elements really, especially on a bigger film, can really make or break the perception, right? Because it's really, this is the first impression you have of a film. But that economy of narrative, that line you just mentioned, I'm a rebel, so I'll rebel. Like that's trailer gold. Like an editor was like, man, I can set this character up in 2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, you just know that that scene has to be in there.
You do, and that's what, there's a certain rhythm and kind of economy if you look in the dialogue, and a lot of times if it doesn't exist in the movie, that's what the editor is finding. One way to think about it is, a movie shoots millions of feet of film in dailies, and then they cut a film out of that, and then that film comes to the trailer house, and the film is the dailies to the trailer.
Mm.
And you really
That's a
have
good
to
way of
be
putting it,
open,
yeah.
and you have to you have to open up and just rethink the movie. Because you're constantly juxtaposing things or upcutting things or moving things around, so you can tell the same story. But it's a totally different discipline. It's a totally different format.
And you also have to be interested in the film too, I imagine, and different films are made for different people. So I guess sometimes are you pulling from other people within the company to say, "Hey, like, maybe this film isn't for my demographic.
Oh, we
What
tap the
does this cut
passions
look."
of our
Okay.
creative people all the time. If we're working on a Marvel movie, we've got editors who just live and breathe Marvel Comics and know, all of the chapter and verse of kind of the fandom, and they can really be almost the strategic thinkers around what goes into the trailer, or what song to use, or what line, or what shot after the title is gonna be the topper. Like I think that passion for entertainment and for the films or characters or genres is a critical piece of hiring, developing, and assigning work. Really, in entertainment marketing, it's a huge part of it. Whether it's the writer or the music supervisor, or the editor, or the creative director, it makes a huge difference. Yeah.
How did your role change when you were promoted to SVP, creative director of theatrical, TV, and streaming?
Yeah, I started out as a creative director. I was editing theatrical trailers. My first creative director role was of theatrical, which means all doing trailers and TV spots for movies, all the major studios. Um, that period of time was like Project X, The World's End. Edgar Wright's The World's End was one
Well, that
particular.
was an incredible end to his trilogy with Hot Fuzz
Yes, the
and
Cornetto trilogy.
Shaun of the Dead. Oh, that was
Yes,
brilliant.
totally. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. So, the Magic Mike, that campaign,
Did you also work on The Americans as well during this time as well?
yeah, well, that was, so you asked about TV streaming. So here I was a creative director in theatrical, and these were all theatrical movies from major studios. But of course, streaming started to explode in the mid aughts, and Netflix starting to do originals was on the horizon. But what we had one client that came to us that really opened up an opportunity for me and the company, and that was FX. So FX was one of the first networks that said we make 10-hour movies, not TV shows, right? They were thinking cinematically. They thought each of their titles was its own brand. They came to a theatrical shop to cut the trailer for a TV show. And that, you would think today that wouldn't be surprising to you, because all TV, all streaming has become essentially movie style,
Mhm.
right? The quality and the cast and the filmmakers that are involved are just as high end. And TV, early on, TV was lesser than film, but FX was a real pioneer in thinking big about what they were making as shows, and they wanted their marketing to reflect that. So we started our relationship, now almost 20 years ago, cutting theatrical style trailers for their TV shows. But soon after I landed there, I started to work on that account, and they were very interested in not just cutting promos from the show, but conceiving of these teasers, these conceptual teasers that we would shoot. And uh, this is where kind of my independent filmmaking, my directing, my writing, and advertising kind of merged.
So
And
the teasers were like a net new production then?
brand new,
Oh,
brand new.
okay. All right.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so
Okay.
they often were a series of teasers. I dubbed them, mosaic teasers because they were often 15 seconds, 20 seconds long. They were very visually driven. They teased in the true sense, where they posed a question. They had some tension in it, and then it would cut to title, but you wouldn't really understand what it was about. And this, if you think about the shows, it was The Americans, it was American Horror Story, it was Fargo. Um, so we would concept and shoot, maybe a half dozen to a dozen of these teasers, and you would be capturing sort of the spirit of the show in these teaser series, and you would if you watch them kind of in aggregate, you kind of got a sense of it. That's why it's like this mosaic kind of approach. But they were all net new. It was all shooting. Sometimes you'd shoot with the cast, but a lot of times they didn't even have the cast in them. They were just conceptual visual ideas that felt true to the themes. So like The Americans was all about uh a family living in suburbia, but they were spies. So, we kind of saw that theme as hiding in plain sight, kind of the paranoia of, you know, suburban living seems like a safe place in America, and yet there's this family, this threat from within. So, hidden in plain sight became the theme, and so we conceived of all of these teasers that really expressed hidden in plain sight. And one teaser that we did that was the first thing out had no cast in it. It was just a dolly along a suburban street, and you just heard the birds chirping. You heard someone mowing their lawn, and there was this house like every other house, but it seemed to have flecks of red on it. And as the camera got closer, there were more and more flecks of red on the white picket fence and on the house. And then you come around, and there's some on the car and on the trash can, and this strange radio signal started to crackle in, and the camera slowed down, and you realized all the dots and flecks of red across all the objects formed a hammer and sickle from a
The Soviet
particular
Union.
camera position. And this radio um, transmission kind of came into focus, and we found these real radio recordings of actual spy transmissions from the Cold War. They were these number stations that transmitted coded things, and we licensed the original Cold War Russian number stations, and that was what was playing. And then the camera took off again, and we just went to The Americans. But that was the opening teaser of the show.
I discovered that show about a year and a half ago after watching season 1 of The Diplomat because that made me a Carrie
Oh
Russell
yeah,
fan,
totally.
and it's funny because she plays the complete opposite, literally, like, between The Americans and in The Diplomat, because she's a spy for the US in one, and in the other one, she's a spy for the Soviet Union, and I gotta tell you, if
Right.
anyone was looking
Yeah.
for a show to binge watch over, the holidays, it's on Disney Plus, and it is
Yeah.
incredible.
It's so
Yes.
good.
Oh, it's a
And it
fantastic
went on
show.
for 4 seasons, and we did this treatment, this teaser treatment for all the seasons. And so you can see like they're making like short films based on really great television. We can concept, we can write, we can go shoot them, we can edit them, we pick the music. It's like the independent film of advertising. So it was a perfect fusion of like my filmmaking love and the advertising space.
Let's bring AI into the conversation because apart from all of your current duties at Motion, you're also the AI thought leader for the company. So I know AI sometimes can be a bit of a dirty word in the depending on who you're talking to in the creative world.
Yes.
But how are you guys at Motion integrating it? Because the technology's here, and it seems like it's something that has to be embraced, but managed to a certain degree as well.
Yeah, I've again, I love all things technical and filmmaking. As I think about creativity, and AI is like sits right in that space. So I really took it upon myself to be the do the initial research. It really started in the Chat GPT moment that woke everybody up. Kind of, we're about 3 years in now, almost to the it was November of what, 2023 or 22, November of 22,
Yeah,
I think
that's
is
when
when it happened. Anyway, Yeah, so I've been really researching and implementing and experimenting with all the various platforms over the years. Um, and my goal was to kind of approach it with curiosity and skepticism. It was fascinating and magical. I think everybody remembers the first time they kind of saw or read what AI or generative AI was doing. It was seemed like a kind of magic trick that seemed impossible and seemed very threatening. And you could just kind of feel the ground shifting beneath your feet. Um, it was such a new paradigm. It really freaked a lot of people out. But I call it AI exposure therapy. I think it's so important to just get
I like that
past
term.
that,
I
past
do.
that and go, what is this thing? What can it do? And more importantly, what can't it do? And so that's been the spirit of how I brought it into the company, really creating a program where we would vet the tools, we'd make sure they were secure, we'd figure out a kind of a way to engage the tools within our security protocol, but really get people hands-on learning it. And in terms of the actual workflow, beyond just experimenting and training people, it's really been a huge tool primarily in previs. So pre-visualization, if we're pitching ideas, we might be creating a pitch deck. You can really get granular about the images that might represent the things you want to shoot. We certainly used it to bring some of those images to life with image to video. In a few cases, we've made kind of animatics or proof of concepts where
Mm.
we would use AI video to kind of bring to life a cut of the spot or tease an element or a shot in that way. Um, and then there's some practical production things that have been really useful for clients that approve it, which is reformatting, outpainting, um, some of the editing, removal or cleanup. A lot of times if we're making a poster, we're designing it vertically, but then let's say it's a poster that has, a forest in the background, and then we need to make a horizontal banner. We can outpaint with AI the same trees, and that might take a human artist, you know, 3 days to do, and you can do it sort of in a prompt. It's the same people doing it. It just means we, can compress some of the time. We've used it for some elements for early comps. And when I say comps, I mean for posters or for some design development that we're doing. A lot of times those elements are helpful. You can cut and paste and get a layout, and then you kind of design over it. In some cases, we might hand paint or do an illustration over it, but, using Gen AI to kind of get some of the ideas on the board. And then there's a few cases where we've used it. For upscaling, large format things out of home that needs to be printed large format. Some style transfers are helpful too. We work with a few brands outside of entertainment, and one of which is a restaurant brand, and they had all of these cocktails that were photographed in their restaurant, and they were all on brand with the
Mm.
appropriate garnish and all that. But we wanted to do this illustrative kind of menu, so we were able to take their brand approved photography and convert them to what looked like hand drawn illustrations, but
Okay.
they would stay on brand because it was based on the structure of the photograph. So that's a good example of something that's kind of style transfer or transformative. But I would say that, it's a challenge to use, especially in entertainment marketing, because the major studios are global studios, and the rules around AI use are different around the world. There's still questions about copyright, chain of title. There's certain suits that are going on right now about the training data. Some of those suits are actually, the major studios are part of them. I think Disney, I think Warner Brothers just signed on, and Paramount are suing, say, Midjourney right now.
Mm.
So I think that's obviously obviously a problem. And I would say the other reason is their livelihood is based on great relationships with human filmmakers and storytellers. And I think that there is a real concern about AI uh, replacing human jobs. And look, that's always happened, right? I mean, we were
It has,
talking
yeah.
about Avid disrupting the Editors Guild, right? Back when I started. But the thing that's different, and I think it can be simply put as this: here's a tool that only functions because it has trained on the sum total of human creativity for free under what's called the Fair Use Act, to create a for-profit tool to re-enter the market from which that training data came. And that is the elephant in the room. And I I don't think we're going to see a real equitable resolution to that, because the toothpaste is out of the tube, as they say. But it's not dissimilar to music when Napster ripped all the songs and threw them on servers for free. It's not that all that got taken down. It got digitized. Spotify, they figured out some kind of payment system. It did not favor the artist, but some new payment system was formed. I think we're going to start seeing some of that. We saw a $1.5 billion payout to authors in the Anthropic suit because they trained on novelists' work. And my wife, who has gone on to be a successful novelist, all of her novels were in the training data. So it really
Okay.
hit home.
Yeah.
She actually is part of that suit, and she's getting paid.
Jeez. Well, I'm
Rest.
glad she's being compensated for it.
Yes, yeah. So anyway, you can see why the creative community could be uh, upset, kind of in an existential way, about the nature of AI.
I wonder if there was that kind of concern going back and looking at other aspects of film and production. Give you an example. So you take a movie like we'll take a movie like Star Wars where they built sets.
Hmm.
And then through the evolution of production work, sets were replaced with the green screen. And now the green screen is sort of being pushed out for, I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think the term is the volume. It's all these
The volume,
LED
yeah,
screens. Yeah, the volume
that's right.
as well. And then you look at that and you're like, but you still required human capital, people to do that. And unfortunately, there are probably fewer set builders now. And then when you move to the green screen, you had post production, I guess graphic designers, you know way better than me who would do that. And then when it came to the volume, I'm sure a lot of those people transferred over, but even what they were doing still changed as well.
It's so true. And look, it's unavoidable. The technological process has always displaced um, workers or transformed the workforce into other jobs. Someone I remember early on in the AI argument, they were saying, there used to be elevator operators until there were electric elevators, right? Where
Yeah, that's
you didn't
true.
need a person standing there pressing your button or closing the gate. Um, but I think those comparisons break down because they don't really capture the tectonic shift that I think AI and generative AI in particular
Yeah.
represents to the creative community. And again, I go back to, it only functions because it has consumed the history of human creative output. And I think that's always kind of unsettled me as well. But again, I don't know that that's ever going to get resolved, because we have major corporations that have already created these foundational models from that training data. I think they'll, 1.5 billion payout for Anthropic is probably just cost of doing business. If on the other side of that, there's just some sort of payment situation, that some licensing deal that they start getting into, and it's pennies on the dollar to them probably in the end.
And Greg, if people want to follow your thoughts on AI, you publish
Yeah,
regularly on your Substack. So
I do.
we're going to put the link down there, but for anyone listening, call it out.
Yeah, it's called Future of Creativity. So futureofcreativity.substack.com. And yeah, I write regularly on the impact of AI in the film and advertising space. So it's a combination of some think pieces. I have a piece up there about the AI elephant in the room around the training data, but I also run tests for how it can be applied to the commercial space and what the tools can and can't do. So there's a lot of kind of practical demos of the tools as they evolve.
And if anyone wants to learn more about what Motion is up to, where can they go to find out?
Yeah, moceanla.com. So moceanla.com. You can check
Okay.
check out our work.
Greg, let's bring this home. You ready for rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. I usually ask people the campaign they're most proud of, but in your case, it's either the trailer or the body of work that you are most proud of.
Yes. I would say in the advertising space, it was this teaser that I shot with John Oliver for Last Week Tonight that became a de facto HBO brand spot. And it was born out of this very simple self-deprecating concept of John Oliver in his own promo being upstaged by all the other more popular shows on HBO.
Okay.
So this was something that we concepted with HBO and the exec producers and John Oliver. We mounted the production and shot it, and it involved Larry David. It involved Kumail Nanjiani because we had Curb Your Enthusiasm as part of it. We had Silicon Valley, and we even had Game of Thrones. So we rebuilt the Game of Thrones set from scratch in LA, and
Okay.
existed for 24 hours and then it was torn down, which I was shocked that we were able to do it. But it just was one of those promos where the stars aligned. It's hilarious. It's so John Oliver. Um, but you'll see if you go to our website or go to my personal website, gregharrisonfilm.com, you can check it out. It's I consider it kind of one of the classic promos we produced at Motion. It's one of my favorites.
I got a question about that. Was there ever a conversation of him popping up on Bill Maher's set?
Yeah, it's so interesting. The early scripts had him popping up on almost any and every show on HBO.
Okay.
And that was part of the creative development. So there was him popping up on Bill Maher. What was the one about the sports agents with The Rock? I can't remember.
I know which one you're
You
talking
know what I'm talking
about.
about? They
Yes.
were sports agents. I can't remember the name of
It's
that
on the tip
show.
of my tongue. Yes, I
Yeah.
know.
Anyway, we had situations where he was popping up in the hot tub with The Rock. We had it was really fun to kind of explore how John thought he was in the promo and they're talking about him, but every time the voiceover says who they're talking about a more popular show. So we explored the entire catalog of HBO in the process.
Okay, your favorite movie?
Um, of all time, hmm,
It could be of all time. It could be the movie that you go to when you just want
yeah,
to unwind. You could watch over and over again, whether it's
yeah,
streaming or on TV. Go
yeah.
for it.
I got to say Tootsie.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with Tootsie because it is so rewatchable. I've always had a love of comedy. I never really set out, to pursue comedy, but I made a comedy show in college. I directed a lot of comedy spots. I've worked with a lot of comedians. I think that movie is such a perfect combination of just an amazing Hollywood comedy that has a great story, a great arc, great themes. The performances are amazing. Bill Murray is like untouchable in that film. Dustin Hoffman can do no wrong. I mean, he's just at the height of his power there. So yeah, that's something I return to probably every year. It's just a comfort watch.
It just popped into my head. The show we're referencing is Ballers.
Ballers.
That's what it was.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
It's the problem with that show is that Ballers usually it's usually equated with basketball, and this was a football show. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
where I was
right.
lost a little bit. Yeah, with David Washington. Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
if Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
If someone's going to make a movie about my life, who would I want to play me? I'm going to say Albert Brooks because um, particularly Albert Brooks in his prime of 70s and 80s movies. I just rewatched Broadcast News. He's just such I love his intelligence and heart and his dry wit. And he's a filmmaker in his own right. And he's often put upon and misunderstood. I just yeah, I'm gonna go with Albert.
He also voiced Hank Scorpio on The Simpsons, which was one of my favorite one and done characters.
Totally, he's amazing.
My follow up: if Hollywood were to make this movie based on your life story, what would you call it?
Yes, I think it would be called Man on the Outside.
Okay.
It was an interesting question. To again, no one's really ever asked me that, but I will say there's been a theme of for whatever success I've had. On one hand, you could say I bootstrapped myself, and I've always figured it out and been entrepreneurial, and I've gathered a team around me. But I think in the process too, I've always felt a little bit on the outside of the system or the process, and I've never really been a great rule follower or a regular part of a club that will have me. So there's always there's it create it I think it the man on the outside. That's a title that kind of speaks to that some of that tension that I've sensed in my career arc.
Kind of a light reference to what we said earlier with Felicity Jones's character. It's a rebellion, so I rebel.
Yeah,
There we go.
that's right.
All right. Uh,
Yes.
Your favorite book?
Um, I have a lot, but I return regularly to the 10th of December, collection of short stories by George Saunders. I think I not only love that book because I think again he's like a master of the short story, but his voice that he found, his personal voice, I really resonate with. He's satirical and deeply humanistic. He tells these outlandish, sometimes almost like surreal stories, but they have like this incredible moral center. Um, but they're also wildly funny. Um, yeah, and I've also been really inspired by his process of finding his voice. You know, he worked really hard, as so many people do, to imitate things he loved, but he didn't really become George Saunders until he started writing in a way. I think he said something like, "I started writing when it didn't feel like writing. I found my voice," and I just thought that was a very instructive um, piece of advice.
Your favorite song?
My favorite song. I mean, I these are so hard. Like favorite song, favorite movies. Like what what time of day, what mood am I in? Like there's a ton. But if I will say that Laura Mabula as an artist, um, she has a lot of songs I love. But she has this song. Is there anybody out there? And it's just so beautiful. There's this arrangement she does on one of her albums that's just this beautiful cinematic orchestral arrangement around her solo voice. Um, and it's kind of this plea to call to others. Is there anybody out there? And it's really kind of I think a song about seeking understanding from others. And so maybe that connects to the man on the outside. I don't know. That's something for my therapist, perhaps.
Okay. The best advice you've ever received?
um, there's two. One came from the making of book of Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotape, a director that I've always loved, but he got his career started directing that movie. And man, he was in his mid 20s and he had such wisdom. But in this book, he said, talent plus perseverance equals luck. Be
Mm.
ready when it happens. And that is, it's like a haiku uh, of getting into the industry or being a creative person. That is it. That's like that's there's more to say, but that's all you really need to know is that.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you say?
Hmm. I think I would encourage myself to not be too as concerned about what other people think. I think, you know, and that's probably true of any creative person getting started, but particularly me coming from the Midwest and going to LA, I just had a imposter syndrome, insecurity around like, what am I doing trying to do this? I feel like a lot of it would have been more fun in the early days if I was less fearful. So maybe I'd give myself that piece of advice.
My signature closing question: if you weren't in media and marketing, what would you be doing and why?
If I was not doing what I was doing, I think I would love to play music and own a farm. And maybe that's a vision of my retirement. I'm trying to convince my wife. She's a city girl. But as I get older, I could be around a fire with a guitar and be on a piece of land, I think, with a few animals.
And we're going to end things right here. Greg, thanks so much for stopping by today. This was a great chat.
It was so fun. I appreciate you calling.